All right, let's talk about spoilers for The Flash. I've been trying to get this off my chest, but the power has been out at my place for like a day, and I couldn't film anything in the dark, obviously, and I wouldn't be able to upload it anyway. But I watched the movie twice. I watched it on the Friday night, and then because the power was out all day, nothing to do at my place, I went out and had dinner, and I said I'd see the movie again. So saw the movie twice in 2 days to see how it would hold up on a second viewing, and it does. Let's start with what I liked. Okay, Ezra Miller is amazing. Can't lie. I liked Ezra Miller before all the controversies. I thought they're really good in Perks of Being a Wallflower. We need to talk about Kevin. Not really a fan of the Fantastic Beasts. I haven't seen those movies, but they're in Hollywood for a reason, and they're really good. And that scene where Barry's talking with himself in the Batcave, and he can't quite tell his younger self that their mother died. Really heartbreaking. Probably one of the best emotionally acted scenes. But also there are scenes where he has to cry, or they have to cry, and like after the Metropolis thing and the flashback and near the end. And then there's a couple moments where they have to cry, and they do a really great job. And a lot of people don't like the younger Barry, but you have to remember that he's not doing a Bill and Ted impression. This younger Barry is not him younger. It's him younger in an alternate timeline where he never faced any tragedy. So Barry, I'm going to call it Barry and then young Barry. So Barry basically has a lot of like trauma going on because his father's been wrongfully imprisoned his whole life, and then his mother's been dead. So this other Barry, young Barry, is basically just like a carefree kind of like, I've never had any struggles in my life. This is pretty chill. I'm going to ask out this girl. I mean, literally the first sequence of young Barry is him kicking over a neighbor's trash can for no reason. So like, he pretty much encapsulates what kind of immature person he would be if he didn't have any hardship. And then the movie also does pontificate on this a little bit with the both Batmans. Ben Affleck says like the scars make us who we are. We shouldn't change things, and same goes for Michael Keaton's Batman later too. So that sort of that theme really rings true. I really like that detail. A lot of people didn't notice that, but the movie does spend a lot of time with the two of them interacting. And going into the film, I knew about some of the secret stuff going on. I knew that there would be a black racer type character, or I guess a Savitar-like Barry clone, because of the toy that came out. There's a picture of a toy. Also, I knew about the Nicolas Cage cameo, but I wasn't sure how they're going to bring it in. I thought they're going to like bring in Nicolas Cage maybe as another weakened Superman, and like he's been captured in another bunker or something, but they never went with that. And the movie for me was really satisfying. It was like really well balanced, paced, really good humor. Like obviously the screen story was done by the two guys who did Game Night and Dungeons and Dragons, and Joe B. Harold, and Andy Muschietti, or not Andy, Christina Hodson came over and she redid the script based off their story. So she probably added the more emotional stuff because it's the same writer as Bumblebee. So I'm guessing she added more gravitas to it, but the movie still seems a little bit jokey. Young Barry is all over the place with jokes, always talking about dick and balls and stuff like that, but he's overplaying the younger. Remember, he's the less trauma version. So also I need to talk about Michael Keaton. Man, they went all out with this character. I could easily tell that they put so much effort into the Ezra Millers and Michael Keaton's Batman, because they didn't just bring back the character. They brought back a future version of the character. There's 7 bat suits in that sequence. One of them's robotic. So you can only infer that maybe he fought Bane or he fought Killer Croc, and like it was like a Tim Burton cool version of one of those. Also, they bring a new Batwing with like a rotating gyro thing in the middle, and all the bat technologies like more updated in the Bat Cave, obviously. And Michael Keaton has a great performance-wise too. There's that scene where he's like fixing his arm, and he looks in the mirror and he just smiles, and you just know that like he's been waiting for this. It's kind of like almost like a Dark Knight Returns moment when it all comes back. And speaking of that, I love the new design for Ben Affleck. They got like the blue in the armor. I love the Wonder Woman cameo, just showing up to show the status quo. but I can see why they didn't use all the Flashpoint comic stuff as for a movie, because it would cost so much. You'd have to have like Atlanteans and Themyscirians at war, and you'd have to bring in the whole Justice League just to play alternate versions of themselves, and it would be very expensive. So they just didn't want to do that. So I can understand that. But for me, I think the biggest problem has to be the third act. Not because of the way it's like done, but just they give so much effort to Michael Keaton's Batman and Barry Allen's, but not Supergirl or the Kryptonians. They brought back the Kryptonians just to be cannon fodder, and I was a little offended by that. I really liked Man of Steel. In fact, before watching the Flash movies, back to back, I watched Justice League Flashpoint Paradox, the Batman 1989, and Man of Steel. And Zack Snyder, you know, either you love him or you hate him. He's got a really great eye for direction. And the action sequences in Man of Steel still hold up 10 years later, especially when they're trashing stuff in Smallville and Metropolis. The finale in The Flash just feels really flat because they're just fighting in the middle of a desert. It's like completely flat. Everyone's just sort of running around shooting lasers at each other. There's not much, you know, rhyme or reason to it. Zod only has like 3 lines of dialogue. They changed the "You Are Not Alone." He has a monologue with Supergirl and Michael Shannon sleepwalking, and talks about like something else. Yeah, he attacks a soldier or something. But Michael Shannon recently said that replaying the character was not satisfying. I have to agree. They didn't give him anything to do. He only had like one scene with another character, and then like that's it. Like, you only have one scene of dialogue with one of the main characters, and that's it. Same goes for Feora. Feora's back, and she rides a dude like a surfboard, and, you know, punches some guys, and then that's it. You know, no lines of dialogue, no sense of, like, obviously she's older, so they tried to, like, you know, use the, what's it called, the helmets to sort of distort it, but, you know, might as well not even been in the movie. Namek gets a lot to do, though. Namek's the big guy. He has a great fight sequence with Michael Keaton, Batman, and you know. But other than that, yeah, the Kryptonians are wasted. They don't have enough scenes with Supergirl, and then they didn't discuss the power levels either. Like whenever the Flash is on screen, they're talking about like, oh Barry, you can't do this, you can't phase that, you can't wear that. You know, they tell you all about the world building of the Speed Force and how like the speed goes back in time. How you can do things like that. They don't explore anything with Supergirl. So when they find her, she's basically anemic because she's been like underground for like 30 years. And then they basically take her to the surface and she gets a small boost of power, but then she's weak again. And we can sense that she's basically like still, she's not on the same level of power as Henry Cavill's Superman, but they never really point that out because in Man of Steel, Henry Cavill's character, he's like 30, 35. He's literally been on Earth his whole life. He's been drinking in the sunlight. He's like super buff, like physically and like power level wise. That's why he's able to take on so many Kryptonians. But Kara, she's basically like a vegetarian version of Superman, and not her fault. She you know, if she spent the next 5 years, you know, lifting weights and staying in the sun, she could solo everyone, but they don't really establish that in the movie, so she ends up getting her ass kicked in every scene. Doesn't have any scenes with Feora. You know, like it's like one sequence with Zod, and like the direction is not that great. It's just messy and people just slamming each other. And you know, I really miss Zack Snyder's direction. They kind of took his villains and didn't do anything with it, but they did so much for Michael Keaton and The Flash, so that's kind of like annoying. What else? Oh, the cameos at the end. They show George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, and Helen Slater, Adam West Batman, and Nicolas Cage. Kind of takes you out of the movie a little bit, but I love those little nods. No Grant Gustin cameo, but whatever. I don't know why they didn't do that. But I'm guessing if this movie was animated, they would have had some sort of cheesy sequence where like all the Supermans come out to help them defeat the Kryptonian army or something. Definitely like the twist of other Barry or younger Barry becoming like unhinged and becoming that Savitar Barry like dark creature. CGI was a little bit wonky for that. Okay, also the CGI was wonky for the whole movie. I'm not talking about the Chrono Bull stuff. That stuff's meant to be weird, uncanny valley. I'm talking about sometimes Ezra Miller's face is like deep faked on another actor, and like the face looks weird. The CGI babies at the beginning looked a little weird. I didn't really care. And then there was, yeah, mainly like Ezra Miller's face sometimes looks weird and just a little dodgy in that regard. Iris West is in the movie a couple of times, but she doesn't really do much for him. She's just like there to be love interest, and that's kind of boring. Wish she had a bigger role, but I'm glad she's in the movie at least. I do think the movie's a little bit disrespectful in terms of Supergirl, though. This will be the first time that she's got a big screen debut, but it's like an alternate version based off Earth 1. People didn't like that, and people didn't like that she was underpowered, but she was still super angsty. So she was, you know, screaming at people and slamming people, but only for short bursts. They didn't do enough. I even came up with a couple of sequences that would have added a little bit more gravitas to either Zod or Supergirl. For example, when Supergirl flies over to them and sees Zod like killing the soldiers, she should have like went up to them and said like, you know, there could have been a scene where they trick her into giving them the Codex, and they don't know that she's got healing powers, so they like stab her, throw her out the ship, and then they betray her by saying like, oh, let's start the world engine, we have the Codex now, and it sort of starts off the world-ending events. And then Kara has to like heal, then fly back, rescue Barry. All that stuff would have been nice to have like a little bit more talking, something for Fiora to do maybe. They could have had like a sequence where some of the Kryptonians go to the Russian black site because her ship is there, and or her pod, and they basically go there and waste the rest of the Russians and then be like, she's not here. Or you could have had something, you know, like the villains, they're introduced really early. They see the ship and everything, and then they're just shafted until the last 20 minutes. So there's definitely some pacing issues there. Obviously, the movie's already like 2.5 hours long, but a couple extra sequences with the Kryptonians and Supergirl wouldn't have hurt in that regard. I did like the dark tone. I mean, like, you see Batman die twice, you see Supergirl die twice, and then multiple times. They simply can't fix everything. That world is doomed. That's the original story of Flashpoint as well. But I'm glad they kind of went with the whole Michael Keaton Batman instead of Jeffrey Dean Morgan as a gunslinger Thomas Wayne Batman, because it's not a bigger pull as well, but some of the Flashpoint stuff just doesn't work. And if you were to do that, it would be cool, but you know, there's no point in bringing in that character if you can't get Cyborg again, because this movie was produced by Walter Hamada and he wouldn't be a part of it. And you know, you see Aquaman at the end, but that's just there to promote the next Aquaman movie. So, and you see Wonder Woman there too, but they're just all sort of there to just be fun cameos and not, you know, be part of the Justice League. And then, because the Flashpoint story is really different, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel this movie is really, really well balanced, to be honest. It's a huge love letter to DC. Obviously, they gave a lot more time, energy to both versions of the Flash and Michael Keaton's Batman. I felt like a little kid, you know, when the Batship comes down and when he's got all those suits, and you know, they imply that Gotham's safe, and like when he's back. Even his death scenes were full of like good acting and stuff. And Ezra Miller was like heartbreaking in all those scenes with his mom too. I really like that. I don't know why they didn't get back Billy Crudup for his father. You know, he was only in the movie for 3 scenes, but that was okay. The George Clooney cameo was fun too. That's just like really random, but I like that. But yeah, they definitely needed to sort of, for me, to make the movie a perfect 10, I only gave it an 8.5, would be to, you know, add a couple more scenes with the Kryptonians and make them more, less of a, Michael Shannon describes them as just an obstacle, a challenge for another character. And a lot of people say like, well, you were such like a brute in the first film. I've rewatched Man of Steel many times, and Michael Shannon does have some good acting in that movie. He's got to kill Jor-El twice in that movie, like the digital version and the real version. His lip quivers. He looks scared before he goes into the Phantom Zone. You know, he yells a lot in the movie, but it's not unwarranted. And when you think about it, he is a perfect foil for Kal-El. You know, he's basically a representation of Krypton's rigidity and the way they can't turn away, they can't change their fate. And Superman's like a different version. He was born the old way. He was given a choice. He's got powers. The Flash doesn't really establish a ticking clock. For example, wouldn't the Kryptonians be like, whoa, I just saw Kara Zor-El and she's flying. What's up with that? She doesn't have a suit on. So maybe they should have implied that they have to stop the Kryptonians, not just to stop the world engine, but to also stop them from getting powers. Because there's going to be a certain point where the Kryptonians are going to you know, take off their armor and be like, wow, we can like fly and stuff and do cool laser eyes and stuff. You know, once they do that, they'd be pretty much unstoppable. Also, they didn't really establish the military very well. They're just like randomly standing there in a group and they get wiped out, and they're still getting wiped out. And, you know, they should have introduced maybe like another country's army or something. I just felt like, yeah, they're going through the motions with the Zod stuff. And, you know, obviously you can't have the Atlantean versus Amazon army, so they should have done a better job, to be honest. If they did a little bit of a better job, it would have been a perfect movie. But the movie gets really well acted, really solid. You know, I saw it twice and it still holds up the second time. Maybe a little bit too jokey the second time, but I did miss some jokes the first time. I also noticed that Andy Muschietti is a really good comedic actor. I mean, not actor, sorry, a comedic director, because a lot of the jokes in this have really great visual style, like the tooth, him running without powers, him slamming to the wall, Aquaman passed out in a puddle, you know, Batman saying like, oh, I would never, thank you, my ego wouldn't allow it. There's a lot of good meme potential, and obviously a lot of it's done on purpose, a lot of great visual gags, like the movie's probably going to have a lot of funny memes, to be honest. I like that too. The audience was laughing at the jokes and stuff. The baby sequence was fun too. You know, seeing Alfred there is great too. A lot of, you know, cameos and stuff like that, but not overstuffed. And I felt like the movie definitely had a way better story than Spider-Man No Way Home. But I just, seeing Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin slam Tom Holland and offer one of the best quotes in Marvel history, I wanted just like a tenth of that for Zod again, and didn't get that, you know. And same for Feora, you know. Obviously it's been 10 years and she looks older, but she doesn't get to do anything. You know, she's got a couple cool sequences where she's killing people, no dialogue, no fight with Supergirl. I think people were expecting certain things, and they didn't really establish that, yeah, Kara is not as strong as Kal ever was in that timeline. And the character's a little bit wasted. So if you're a fan of Supergirl, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed seeing her get wasted. And, you know, a lot of... Okay, so I'm going to discuss her performance. The first time that I watched the movie, I thought she was a little stiff and I didn't like her performance. But when I saw it again, I realized that it's done on purpose. You know, she's supposed to have been captured for 30 years. She wouldn't smile or laugh or do anything. She'd be very jaded at this point and a little bit rough around the edges, so I can understand that part of the performance. But then again, she doesn't get a lot to do. She only gets one sequence with Zod. It's cut short. No fight with Feora. If they, you know, I understand that, you know, Michael Keaton Batman dies too, but he gets like he gets to go really like great, and she doesn't. I would have liked to be a little bit more fair with her character, and you know, obviously the universes are all being rebooted, but it's still a little bit disrespectful that, you know, some characters get favoritism and some don't. So in that regard, The Flash for me is a very entertaining movie. I don't really care about the controversies with the main actor. They're getting help. Okay, I gotta talk about that. So there's multiple instances in this movie where they make references to Ezra Miller's crimes or issues, and I'm not sure if the movie just had all these jokes and he's reflecting the role, or they added them in later with reshoots, which is really strange. There's a scene where he saves all the babies and he starts telling a woman to seek the help of a mental health professional, which is, you know, something that he mentioned in his their apology. And then there's also a scene where he literally robs a neighbor of booze, which happened in real life too. There's also the scene where he talks about drugging himself and then punching himself out. There's a scene of Barry stealing an old person's pants and blouse. There's like, the baby in the microwave is not even a thing, but like, it was just like, I'm not sure if these were added in later to play up the fun, to play off the crimes, or it was already there. It was really strange. It was really surreal. I found myself laughing really hard and being a little uncomfortable. It's the equivalent of like in Expendables, Stone Cold Steve Austin slaps someone or something, and then the villain's like, this guy's not afraid to hit a woman. But he in real life, he had domestic abuse stuff going on with his wife, I think. So like, it's just a little uncomfortable, or you know, when you reference something in the real world. But anyways, The Flash for me was a very satisfying movie. The guy I was with, my friend, he enjoyed the hell of it. He went into it blind, so he was just like gasping at everything, and it was a great crowd. Definitely a crowd-pleasing fan blockbuster for DC. Love letter to all things DC. And yeah, so 8.5 out of 10.